You think you can buy love, Vivian? All you know is how to write checks. Ember's words cut deep as she smirks at me, her hand possessively clutching my husband Ashton's arm. Ashton deserves a woman who appreciates his talent, not some workaholic hag. I stare at my husband in disbelief. Surely he'll defend me, tell Ember she's out of line. But instead he pulls her closer, his eyes cold as they meet mine. I want a divorce, Vivian, and I'm keeping the restaurant. It's the least you owe me for wasting my youth. His words slice through me like a knife. This can't be happening. I think back to when we first met. Me, a rising corporate lawyer, him, a charming bartender at the swanky lounge I frequented after long days at the firm. He had dreams of becoming a chef, and I believed in him. I paid for his culinary school, poured my savings into launching his restaurant. And this is how he repays me? Ember's victorious grin ignites a fury within me. They want to play dirty? Fine. Game on. They have no idea who they're messing with. I'm Vivian Sinclair, and I never lose. 5 years ago, things were so different. Ashton and I were deeply in love, or so I thought. We'd spend hours talking about his dreams of opening a world-class restaurant. You make the money, I'll make the magic, he'd say with a wink. And like a fool, I believed him. I worked tirelessly, climbing the corporate ladder to afford the life we dreamed of together. The long hours paid off when I made junior partner. To celebrate, I surprised Ashton with a check, enough to cover his culinary school tuition and then some. He swept me into his arms, peppering my face with kisses. "You're my angel investor," he murmured. "I'll make you so proud." And he did, graduating top of his class. Buoyed by his success, I took out a business loan and signed a lease on a prime location downtown. Ashton's Bistro was born, and my husband was the toast of the town. Critics raved, reservations were booked months in advance. I beamed with pride at every accolade. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Late nights at the firm meant missed dinners, forgotten anniversaries. "You're never here, Vivian," Ashton would complain. "I feel like I'm married to your job." So I scaled back at work, started taking cooking classes at the restaurant to spend more time with him. That's where I met Ember, a lively young food blogger with a magnetic personality. She was everything I wasn't, carefree, fun, passionate about food. We bonded over Ashton's culinary genius, and I was grateful to have a new friend. How naive I was. The signs were all there, I just didn't want to see them. The hushed phone calls, the late nights at the restaurant. "Oh, Vivian, you're just being paranoid," Ashton would assure me. Ember is a business contact, nothing more. Nothing more, indeed. The image of them tangled in our bed, clothes strewn across the floor, is seared into my brain. And now they have the audacity to ambush me in my own home, demanding I hand over everything I've worked for. They think they've won, but the game is just beginning. I'll show them what happens when you cross Vivian Sinclair. My dear husband and his mistress picked the wrong woman to mess with. They'll rue the day they betrayed me. I straighten my spine, a cold smile spreading across my lips as I stare them down. "Enjoy your little victory," I say, my voice dripping with venom. "It won't last long. I'll destroy you both, even if it's the last thing I do." The betrayal stings like a fresh wound as I throw myself into work, desperate to ignore the growing distance between Ashton and me. Late nights at the office become my refuge, a place to bury the pain and pretend everything's fine. But deep down, I know it's not. Ember's constant presence at the restaurant doesn't help. She's always there, flitting around Ashton, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm. It makes me sick to see how close they've become. One evening, I decide to surprise Ashton with a romantic dinner at home. I slave over a gourmet meal, light candles, put on a slinky dress, but when he walks in, he barely notices. "What's all this?" he asks, his tone more annoyed than appreciative. "I thought we could have a nice night in," I say, forcing a smile. "Just the two of us," he shrugs. "I'm beat, Viv. It's been a long day at the restaurant. Ember and I were experimenting with some new recipes and lost track of time." There it is again. Ember. Always Ember. I bite back a retort and try to salvage the evening. "Well, I made your favorite, truffle risotto with seared scallops. Come, sit down and relax." But the meal is tense, the conversation stilted. Ashton picks at his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. I want to scream, to demand he pay attention to me, but I don't. I just sip my wine and pretend everything's perfect. Later, as I'm clearing the dishes, I overhear Ashton on the phone in the next room. I can't do this anymore, he's saying, his voice low. I feel trapped, unappreciated. She doesn't understand me like you do. My heart clenches. He's talking to her. I know it. Part of me wants to confront him, but I'm afraid of what he'll say, afraid of losing him. Instead, I bury myself in work, taking on more cases, logging longer hours. My best friend Nadia grows concerned. You need to do something, Viv. But she urges over lunch one day. Hire a private investigator. Find out the truth. You can't keep living like this. But I brush off her suggestion. It's just a rough patch, I insist. Every marriage has them. We'll get through it. Even as I say the words, I know I'm lying to myself. The cracks are widening, the foundation crumbling. And then one night, I find a text from Ember on Ashton's phone. I can't wait to taste your new creation, it reads, followed by a winking emoji. My blood boils. I confront Ashton, waving the phone in his face. What the hell is this? I demand. He snatches the phone from my hand, his face twisting in anger. It's business, Vivian. God, you're so paranoid. Ember's helping me develop new menu items. That's it. Don't lie to me, I hiss. I see how you two are together. The secret glances, the inside jokes. You're sleeping with her, aren't you? Ashton scoffs. You're delusional. Maybe if you spent more time being a wife and less time being a lawyer, you wouldn't have these crazy ideas. His words are like a slap. I recoil, tears stinging my eyes. I've given you everything, Ashton, my love, my support, my money, and this is how you repay me? He just shakes his head. I'm done with this conversation. I'm going to the restaurant to clear my head. Don't wait up. As the door slams behind him, I crumple to the floor, sobbing. How did we get here? What happened to the man I married, the love we shared? I know I can't keep living in denial. Nadia's right. I need answers. With shaking hands, I dial the number of a well-known private investigator. It's time to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be. If Ashton thinks he can betray me and walk away unscathed, he's got another thing coming. I'll find out exactly what he's been up to with Ember. And when I do, there will be hell to pay. The private investigator's report confirms my worst fears. Grainy photos of Ashton and Ember, caught in intimate embraces, secret rendezvous at her apartment. The evidence is undeniable. My husband is having an affair. I confront him that evening, slamming the photos down on the kitchen counter. Care to explain these? I ask, my voice trembling with rage. Ashton barely glances at the pictures. Where did you get those? Have you been spying on me? Don't try to turn this around on me, I snap. You're the one screwing your little food blogger behind my back. He has the audacity to roll his eyes. It's not what you think, Vivian. Ember and I, we have a connection. She understands my passion for food, my dreams. She supports me in ways you never have. Supports you? I laugh bitterly. I'm the one who paid for your culinary school, bankrolled your precious restaurant. I've supported you every step of the way. With money, sure, but emotionally? You're never there, Viv. Always working, always too busy for me. Ember makes me feel alive, appreciated. His words cut deep, but I refuse to let him see how much he's hurting me. If you're so unhappy, why stay with me? Why not just ask for a divorce? Ashton smirks. And give up the cushy life you provide? The fancy apartment, the expensive toys? I'm not stupid, Vivian. I know a good thing when I have it. Rage boils inside me. So you thought you could have your cake and eat it too? Keep me around to foot the bills while you screw your mistress on the side? It's not like that, he insists, but I can see the lie in his eyes. Get out, I hiss. Get out of my house, my life. I never want to see you again. Ashton shrugs. Fine, but don't think you're getting rid of me that easily. I have just as much right to the restaurant, to everything we've built together, and I'll fight you for it. He storms out, slamming the door behind him. I sink to the floor, hot tears streaming down my face. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? I trusted him, loved him, and all along he was betraying me. Nadia comes over that night, a bottle of wine in hand. I'm so sorry, Viv, she says, hugging me tight. I knew something was off with Ashton, but I never imagined. He's been cheating on me with Ember, I choke out. He wants a divorce, says he's entitled to half of everything, the restaurant, our assets, all of it. Nadia's eyes flash with anger. Like hell he is. We'll make him pay for what he's done to you, Viv. He doesn't deserve a cent. I nod, wiping away my tears. You're right. It's time to stop crying and start fighting. Ashton wants to play dirty? Well, two can play at that game. The next morning, I march into my lawyer's office. the investigator's report clutched in my hand. I want to file for divorce, I tell him, and I want you to find any dirt you can on my husband, dig into his finances, his business dealings. I have a feeling he's hiding something. My lawyer nods. Consider it done. We'll make sure you come out on top, Vivian. He won't know what hit him. As I leave the office, a sense of cold determination settles over me. Ashton thinks he can destroy me, but he's underestimated the woman he married. I built him up from nothing, and now I'll tear him down just as easily. He and Ember want a war? They've got one. And I never lose a fight. They'll both pay for their betrayal, one way or another. I'll make sure of it. The divorce proceedings are ugly, a bitter battle of he said, she said. Ashton paints me as a cold, unloving workaholic, while I expose his infidelity and financial improprieties. My lawyer uncovers evidence of Ashton's embezzlement from the restaurant, funneling money into a secret account to fund his lavish gifts for Ember. Armed with this information, we negotiate a favorable settlement. Ashton walks away with nothing. No stake in the restaurant, no alimony, just the clothes on his back and his precious mistress by his side. But my victory is short-lived. Ashton and Ember launch a smear campaign against me, trashing my reputation to anyone who will listen. They post vicious lies on social media, accusing me of being a ruthless gold digger who never loved Ashton, only his potential for success. Their words sting, but I hold my head high. I know the truth, and so do those closest to me. Nadia stands firmly by my side, a fierce ally in the face of their cruelty. At the restaurant, I waste no time cleaning house. I fire Ashton and Ember on the spot, relishing the shock and outrage on their faces as I have security escort them from the premises. You can't do this, Ashton sputters. This is my restaurant, my dream. Not anymore, I say coldly. You lost the right to call it yours the moment you betrayed me. Now get out of my sight before I have you both arrested for trespassing. Ember hurls obscenities at me as they're dragged away, but I don't flinch. Let them spew their venom. They're powerless now, nothing more than a footnote in my life. With Ashton and Ember gone, I pour my energy into revamping the restaurant. I hire a talented new head chef, update the menu, and rebrand the entire concept. Ashton's Bistro becomes Vivian's, a chic and modern eatery that quickly gains buzz among the city's foodies. The grand reopening is a smash success, with lines out the door and glowing reviews from critics. As I mingle with the guests, accepting their congratulations and well wishes, I feel a sense of pride and vindication. I built this place, made it thrive, and I did it all without Ashton. But my triumph is tempered by whispers of Ashton and Ember's latest antics. They've been blacklisted from every reputable restaurant in town, reduced to working in seedy dives and fast food joints. Part of me feels a twinge of pity, but I quickly push it aside. They brought this on themselves with their lies and betrayal. Months pass, and Vivian's goes from strength to strength. We expand to a second location, then a third. I become a fixture on the city's culinary scene, sought after for interviews and partnerships. And then one day I spot a familiar face in the crowd at a food festival. Ashton, looking haggard and defeated, Ember clinging to his arm like a lifeline. They catch my eye, and I see the flash of anger and resentment in their gazes. Well, well, Ember sneers. If it isn't the great Vivian Sinclair, lording her success over the little people. You ruined our lives, Ashton spits. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? I regard them coolly. You ruined your own lives, I say. I just stopped letting you ruin mine. They lunge at me then, hurling insults and accusations, but security quickly intervenes. As they're dragged away screaming and cursing my name, I feel a weight lift from my shoulders. I'm free of them, I realize. Free of their toxicity, their lies, their manipulation. I've built a new life for myself, one filled with success and purpose, and they have no power over me anymore. Let them wallow in their misery, their bitterness. I'm done being dragged down by their darkness. I have a bright future ahead of me, and I intend to make the most of every moment. I walk away from the festival with my head held high, ready to embrace whatever challenges and triumphs lie ahead. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am unbreakable. The success of Vivian's is a balm to my battered soul. As the restaurant thrives, expanding to new locations across the city, I throw myself into my work with renewed passion. It's a welcome distraction from the pain of Ashton's betrayal, a way to channel my anger into something productive. But even as I bask in the glow of my achievements, I can't shake the desire for revenge. I want Ashton and Ember to suffer, to feel the same humiliation and despair they inflicted on me. My opportunity arrives in the form of a high-profile food festival where Vivian's has been invited to showcase our signature dishes. As I'm prepping my team for the event, I overhear a startling conversation between two of my sous chefs. "Did you hear about Ashton Sinclair?" one of them whispers. "Apparently, he and that blogger chick have been blacklisted from every decent restaurant in the city. No one will hire them after the stunt they pulled with Vivian." "Serves them right," the other chef scoffs. "I heard they're barely scraping by, working dead-end jobs and living in some dump of an apartment." A thrill of vindication runs through me. So the mighty have fallen. Ashton and Ember, once the darlings of the culinary scene, now reduced scraping the bottom of the barrel. But it's not enough. I want to see their downfall for myself, to revel in their misery. And what better place to do it than at the food festival, where the cream of the crop will be gathered to celebrate the city's finest cuisine. I make some discreet inquiries and discover that Ashton and Ember have indeed hit rock bottom. They're working as lowly prep cooks at a seedy diner, barely making ends meet. The image of them toiling away in a greasy kitchen, their dreams of culinary stardom shattered, fills me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. On the day of the festival, I arrive early to oversee the setup of the Vivian's booth. As I'm arranging our artfully plated creations, I catch a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. Ashton, looking haggard and defeated, Ember clinging to his arm like a desperate barnacle. Our eyes meet, and I see the flash of recognition, followed by pure, unadulterated loathing. They make a beeline for me, pushing through the throng of festival-goers with single-minded determination. "Well, well, well," Ember sneers as they approach. "If it isn't the great Vivian Sinclair lording her success over the little people. Come to gloat, have you?" I regard them coolly, taking in their shabby appearance and the bitter lines etched into their faces. "I'm here to showcase my restaurant," I say evenly. "What brings you two to the festival? Surely you're not here to sample the gourmet offerings." Ashton's face twists into an ugly scowl. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you? Ruining our lives, blacklisting us from the industry. Are you happy now, Vivian? Is this what you wanted?" I feel a flare of anger at his accusation. "You ruined your own lives," I snap. "I didn't force you to cheat, to lie, to betray me. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences." Ember lets out a shrill laugh. "Consequences? Is that what you call it? You destroyed us, Vivian. You took everything we had and ground it into dust. And you took everything I had and stomped on it without a second thought," I retort. "My love, my trust, my marriage, you betrayed me in the worst possible way, and for what? A cheap fling and some ego boost?" Ashton's face reddens with rage. "You never appreciated me," he snarls, "never supported my dreams. Ember understands me in ways you never could." I shake my head in disbelief. "I gave you everything, Ashton. My heart, my money, my unwavering support, and you threw it all away for a piece of ass. Well, I hope she was worth it, because now you have nothing, no restaurant, no reputation, no future, and you have no one to blame but yourselves." With that, I turn on my heel and walk away, leaving them sputtering with impotent fury. Let them stew in their own misery, I think. They've reaped what they sowed, and I wash my hands of them both. As I return to the Vivian's booth, head held high, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. I've confronted my demons and emerged victorious. Ashton and Ember are nothing more than a bitter memory now, a cautionary tale of what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. I am Vivian Sinclair, restaurateur extraordinaire, and I bow to no one, least of all a pair of backstabbing traitors who thought they could bring me down. I've risen from the ashes of their betrayal, and I will continue to soar. Nothing and no one can stop me now. The food festival marks a turning point in my life. With Ashton and Ember's public humiliation, I feel a sense of closure, a readiness to move on from the pain of their betrayal. I throw myself into my work with renewed vigor, determined to make Vivian's the most acclaimed restaurant in the city. And it pays off. Within months, we're booked solid every night, with a waitlist stretching weeks in advance. Critics rave about our innovative menu and impeccable service, and I become a regular fixture on the culinary scene, sought after for interviews and collaborations. But even as I bask in my success, I can't help but keep tabs on Ashton and Ember. Call it morbid curiosity, but I need to know just how far they've fallen. Through the grapevine, I learned that they've been blacklisted from every reputable restaurant in town. No one wants to be associated with the scandalous couple who betrayed the beloved Vivian Sinclair. They're forced to take whatever scraps they can get, working menial jobs in fast food joints and seedy diners. A part of me feels a twinge of pity for them. After all, I once loved Ashton deeply, and I can't forget the good times we shared. But then I remember the pain they caused me, the callous way they discarded our marriage, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporates like mist in the sun. Let them suffer, I think. Let them feel a fraction of the heartbreak and humiliation they inflicted on me. It's no less than they deserve. As the months pass, I hear whispers of their increasingly desperate situation. They've been evicted from their apartment, unable to make rent on their meager wages. They're living out of Ember's beat-up old car, sneaking into shelters for meals and showers. It's a far cry from the lavish lifestyle they once enjoyed, funded by my hard work and sacrifices. The irony is not lost on me. One evening, as I'm leaving the restaurant after a particularly grueling shift, I spot a familiar figure huddled in the alley behind the building. It's Ashton, looking gaunt and filthy, his once pristine chef's white stained and tattered. He looks up at me with bloodshot eyes, a mixture of shame and resentment on his haggard face. "Come to gloat?" he rasps, his voice rough from disuse. I shake my head. "I take no pleasure in your suffering, Ashton. Despite what you may think, I never wanted this for you." He lets out a bitter laugh. "Could have fooled me. You took everything from us, Vivian. Our jobs, our reputations, our future. You ruined our lives." I feel a flare of anger at his accusation. "You ruined your own lives," I snap. "I didn't force you to cheat, to lie, to betray me. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences." Ashton's face twists into a sneer. "Consequences? Is that what you call it? We're living on the streets, Vivian, begging for scraps like dogs. Is this the revenge you wanted? To see us reduced to nothing?" I take a deep breath, trying to calm the rage simmering in my veins. "I never wanted revenge, Ashton. I wanted justice. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain you caused me, to understand the magnitude of your betrayal. But I never wished for this. I never wanted to see you destroyed." He scoffs. "Could have fooled me." I sigh, suddenly feeling very tired. "Think what you want, Ashton. But know this, I've moved on. I've built a new life for myself, one that doesn't include you or Ember. And I'm happy, truly happy, for the first time in years." I turn to walk away, but his voice stops me. "Vivian, wait." I glance back over my shoulder, seeing a flicker of the man I once loved in his haunted eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispers, "for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it." I nod, a lump forming in my throat. "I appreciate that, Ashton. But you're right, it doesn't change anything. We can't go back to what we were. That life is over." With that, I walk away, leaving him slumped in the alley. As I climb into my car and drive off into the night, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. The anger and pain that have fueled me for so long begin to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of peace. I have survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and I have emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am finally free. With Ashton's apology still ringing in my ears, I throw myself into expanding Vivian's empire. We open new locations across the city, each one more successful than the last. My name becomes synonymous with culinary excellence, and I'm hailed as a visionary in the industry. But my success is about more than just personal achievement. I want to use my platform to make a difference, to empower other women who have faced adversity and betrayal. I start a mentorship program for aspiring female chefs, offering guidance and support as they navigate the cutthroat world of professional kitchens. I also partner with local women's shelters, donating a portion of Vivian's profits to help survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives. It's deeply fulfilling work, and it gives me a sense of purpose beyond the daily grind of running a restaurant. I feel like I'm making a real difference in people's lives, using my own pain and struggle as a catalyst for positive change. But even as I bask in the glow of my newfound purpose, I can't help but think of Ashton and Ember. Despite everything they've done, a part of me still feels a twinge of pity for them. I know firsthand how easy it is to get caught up in the allure of success, to let ego and ambition cloud your judgment. And while I can never forgive their betrayal, I can't help but wonder if they truly understood the consequences of their actions. Through the grapevine, I hear that they've hit rock bottom, blacklisted from the industry, drowning in debt, and struggling with addiction. They're a cautionary tale of what happens when you let greed and selfishness consume you. A part of me wants to reach out, to offer some kind of olive branch, but I know it's not my responsibility to save them from themselves. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the fallout. Instead, I focus on my own healing, on building a life that is authentic and fulfilling. I surround myself with people who lift me up, who support my dreams and celebrate my successes. Nadia becomes my rock, my confidant, and my sounding board. She's there for me through every triumph and setback, always ready with a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. Together, we host lavish charity events at Vivian's, raising money and awareness for causes close to our hearts. I speak openly about my own experiences, hoping to inspire others to find strength in the face of adversity. And slowly but surely, I feel the wounds of Ashton's betrayal begin to heal. The pain and anger that once consumed me fade into the background, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. I know I'll never forget what he did, but I refuse to let it define me. I am more than the sum of my scars, more than the product of someone else's cruelty. I am Vivian Sinclair, a survivor, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with. And I will spend the rest of my life using my voice and my platform to lift up others, to create a world where no one has to suffer in silence. As I stand on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, looking out over the twinkling lights of the city, I feel a sense of gratitude wash over me. I have lost much, but I have gained so much more. I have found my purpose, my passion, and my power. And I know that no matter what challenges lie ahead, I have the strength and resilience to overcome them. Let Ashton and Ember wallow in their misery, their regret. I have moved on, focused on building a life that is rich in love, purpose, and meaning. I am Vivian Sinclair, and I am unstoppable. I can't do this anymore, Nathan. You've cheated again. Let's just get divorced. My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. The living room of our modest home, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, felt cold and uninviting. Nathan stood there, his back to the fading sunset outside the window. His silhouette was as hard and unyielding as the man himself. Divorce? Really, Elise? After all this time? Nathan's voice was laced with sarcasm. He turned to face me, a smirk playing on his lips, the same lips that whispered sweet nothings and later lies. Yes, Nathan, 4 years of marriage and all I've earned are lies and betrayal. Even your parents agree with me. I felt a surge of courage, bolstered by the unexpected support from his parents. I saw their disapproving glances at their son, their sympathetic looks towards me. Nathan's face hardened. My parents? What do they know about our marriage? They know enough. My words were a whisper, but they sliced through the tension in the room. Nathan's smirk vanished, replaced by a sneer. Fine, Elise, you want a divorce? You'll get it. But remember, you're leaving with nothing. No alimony, no child support. You can take my parents and those brats with you. His words stung, but I stood my ground. I don't care about your conditions, Nathan. All I know is I can't be your wife any longer. He scoffed. You think you can survive without me? You're nothing without me, Elise. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'd rather have nothing than live a lie with you. Nathan stepped closer, his face inches from mine. You know, being cheated on? Maybe it's also the fault of the person being cheated on. Ever thought of that, Elise? His words were a slap across my face. I recoiled, not from his proximity, but from the venom in his voice. The Nathan I once knew, the man I fell in love with, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, cold and cruel. I've grown tired of your whining and your pathetic face. You know what? A good-looking divorced man is quite the catch. His voice dripped with arrogance. I stared at him, my heart racing with a mix of fear and anger. Is this really who you are, Nathan? He shrugged. Take it or leave it, Elise. I don't care. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm leaving, Nathan, and I'm taking our daughters with me. They don't deserve a father like you. Nathan laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. Good luck, Elise. You'll come crawling back. They always do. But I knew I wouldn't. I turned my back on Nathan, on our life together, and walked away. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. It was over. The battle was just beginning, but I had taken the first step towards freedom. As I walked away, I realized this was not just the end. It was a new beginning. The morning after I left Nathan, I found myself at his parents' house. The air was thick with unspoken words as I sat at their kitchen table, my twin daughters playing quietly at my feet. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, Nathan's parents, exchanged a glance full of sorrow and regret. "Elise, we need to tell you something about Nathan," Mr. Hamilton began, his voice heavy with unease. "Something we should have shared a long time ago." I nodded, bracing myself for more revelations. "Nathan has always been, well, charming to women. Since high school," Mrs. Hamilton interjected, her voice trembling. "He would date multiple girls, juggling them without a care." My heart sank. The man I married, the father of my children, was a habitual cheater. It wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a pattern. "We thought he changed when he met you," Mr. Hamilton continued, his voice filled with disappointment. "But we were wrong. We're so sorry, Elise." I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but mostly I felt betrayed. Not just by Nathan, but by everyone who knew and said nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out as a whisper, more to myself than to them. We hoped he had changed," Mrs. Hamilton said, tears in her eyes, "but we were wrong. We failed you both." The revelation was a bitter pill to swallow. Nathan's parents, whom I had come to love and respect, had kept this crucial piece of information from me. Yet their remorse was genuine. "Thank you for telling me now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I need to think about what to do next." As I left their house, my mind was racing. Nathan's betrayal wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a part of who he was. And I had been blind to it all. In the following days, I poured my energy into my job search. With a renewed sense of purpose, I landed a position at a marketing firm. It wasn't just about financial independence. It was about reclaiming my identity. I also started gathering evidence of Nathan's infidelity. Every receipt, every late-night call, every unexplained absence. I meticulously documented everything. If Nathan thought I was going to walk away quietly, he was sorely mistaken. The final straw came a week later when I discovered another love letter in Nathan's belongings, filled with passionate declarations. It was like a punch to the gut. Confronting him wasn't an option. I needed a different approach, an approach that would hit him where it hurt the most. I called my lawyer and set the wheels in motion for the divorce. Nathan would learn the hard way that betrayal comes with a price, and I was going to make sure he paid it in full. I sat across from my lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, in his stark, unadorned office. The papers in front of me were a tangible representation of my newfound resolve. "Everything's in order," Mr. Jacobs said, adjusting his glasses. "Once Nathan is served these papers, the process begins. Are you ready for this?" I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. "I am. Nathan needs to understand that he can't just walk over people without consequences." Mr. Jacobs gave me an understanding look. "And the evidence of his affairs?" "I have them," I replied, handing him a folder thick with documentation. Photos, messages, receipts, everything that painted the sordid picture of Nathan's betrayal. "Good. This will strengthen your case for alimony and child support. It's not just about the money, Elise. It's about holding him accountable." As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of empowerment. I wasn't just a victim of Nathan's infidelity. I was a woman taking control of her life. The following weeks were a whirlwind. I juggled my new job, caring for my daughters, and the divorce proceedings. It was exhausting, but with each passing day, I felt stronger, more capable. Then came the day Nathan was served the divorce papers. His reaction was immediate and explosive. He called me, his voice dripping with anger and disbelief. "Are you out of your mind, Elise? You think you can take me to the cleaners and get away with it?" I held the phone away from my ear, his tirade a distant, angry buzz. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke calmly. "It's not about revenge, Nathan. It's about fairness. You broke our marriage vows, and now you have to face the consequences." "You won't get a dime from me," he spat. "We'll see," I replied, and ended the call. That night, I lay awake, thinking about the path ahead. It was going to be a tough battle, but I was ready for it. Nathan had underestimated me, and that was his biggest mistake. I thought about my daughters, sleeping peacefully in the next room, They deserved a better life, a life free from the shadow of their father's deceit. And I was going to give it to them, no matter what it took. Nathan's true colors were showing, and everyone was going to see them. The charming, handsome man they knew was just a facade. Underneath lay a man capable of deceit and betrayal, and I was going to expose him for who he really was. The game had just begun, and I was playing to win. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the air charged with tension. I sat rigidly, my lawyer beside me as we waited for the judge to enter. Across the room, Nathan sat with his lawyer, his expression one of smug confidence. As the judge entered and proceedings began, I felt a knot in my stomach. This was it, the moment of truth. Nathan Taylor, the evidence presented by your wife indicates a pattern of infidelity and financial irresponsibility, the judge began, his voice stern. How do you respond to these allegations? Nathan stood, his posture relaxed, almost dismissive. Your Honor, my wife is exaggerating. Sure, I might have had a few indiscretions, but who hasn't? She's blowing this whole thing out of proportion. His cavalier attitude infuriated me. He still didn't grasp the severity of his actions. Mr. Taylor, this is a court of law, not a social club. I advise you to take these proceedings seriously, the judge warned. As the hearing progressed, Nathan's facade began to crumble. Each piece of evidence my lawyer presented seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Photos, messages, bank statements, the truth laid bare for all to see. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my hands trembling slightly. Your Honor, I entered this marriage believing in love and trust. What I got instead was deception and heartache. Nathan's actions have not only broken our family, but have also set a poor example for our children. Nathan rolled his eyes, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the judge. The impact of his actions goes beyond just emotional pain. Financially, I was left in a vulnerable position, having to start from scratch while caring for our daughters. I seek fair compensation, not out of spite, but out of necessity, I concluded, my voice steady. The judge nodded, making notes. Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Your statement has been noted. As the hearing ended, Nathan approached me, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. You're going to regret this, Elise. You've made an enemy out of me. I met his gaze squarely. No, Nathan, you did that all by yourself. Leaving the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for my dignity and the future of my children. Nathan had shown his true colors, and now he would face the consequences. The drama was far from over, but I had taken a significant step in reclaiming my life, and I was ready for whatever came next. The divorce settlement was more than just a legal victory. It was a moral one. Nathan had been ordered to pay a substantial amount in alimony and child support, a decision that left him seething. A few days after the ruling, I received a call from Nathan. His voice was a mix of anger and desperation. You think you've won, Elise? You think you can just take my money and run? You've ruined me. His words were meant to intimidate me, but I felt an inner strength that hadn't been there before. This isn't about winning or losing, Nathan. It's about taking responsibility. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences. You'll pay for this. I'll make sure of it, he threatened. Threats won't change anything, Nathan. It's time for you to start facing reality, I replied before ending the call. In the weeks that followed, Nathan tried various tactics to evade his financial obligations. But with the law on my side and a determined lawyer, we countered each attempt. Meanwhile, word of Nathan's actions and the divorce began to spread. His reputation, once that of a charming and successful businessman, was now tarnished. He faced scrutiny and judgment from those he once considered friends and colleagues. As I rebuilt my life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Nathan was finally experiencing the fallout of his actions. His once carefree life was now filled with the repercussions of his choices. But it wasn't just about Nathan's downfall. This was also about my rise from the ashes of a broken marriage. I was building a new life for myself and my daughters, a life free from lies and betrayal. One evening, as I put my daughters to bed, my younger daughter looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, are you happy now?" Her question caught me off guard, but then I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. We're going to be just fine." As I kissed them good night, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and in its wake, it had left a newfound strength and resilience in me. Nathan's downfall was a harsh reminder of the price of deceit, but it was also a testament to the power of standing up for oneself. I had fought for justice, not just for me, but for my children as well. The chapter of Nathan was closed, but a new chapter was beginning for us, one filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. The world outside my window seemed brighter, the air fresher. It had been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and life had taken on a new rhythm. My daughters were thriving, happy and adjusted, and I had found fulfillment in my job and newfound independence. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Nathan. Hesitant, I answered. "Elise, you've destroyed my life." Nathan's voice was frantic, a stark contrast to his once cool demeanor. I sighed. "Nathan, you did that yourself. I just stopped accepting it." "I lost my job because of the scandal, Elise. Because of you." His voice cracked with desperation. "That was the result of your actions, Nathan, not mine," I replied firmly. "You think you're better off without me? You think you've won?" His words were laced with bitterness. "I didn't do this to win, Nathan. I did it to survive, to protect our children. This isn't a game, it's life, and it's time you took responsibility for yours." There was silence on the other end, and then he hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, reflecting on how far I had come. In the months following the divorce, rumors of Nathan's behavior had circulated. His charming facade had crumbled, revealing the man beneath. He had lost his job, his reputation, and much of his social circle. The consequences of his actions were catching up to him. But for me, life was moving in a positive direction. I had reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and my relationship with my daughters had never been stronger. We had created a new family unit, one built on love, trust, and respect. As I left work that day, I thought about the journey I had been on, from the pain and betrayal to the fight for justice and the rebuilding of my life. It had been a difficult path, but one that led to growth and empowerment. Nathan's downfall was a harsh lesson in accountability. For me, it was a reminder that no matter how dark things seem, there is always a path to light. I picked up my daughters from school, their laughter and chatter filling the car. As we drove home, I realized that this was what true happiness felt like. It wasn't just about overcoming Nathan, it was about rediscovering myself and building a better future for my family. The road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with a sense of hope and optimism. The chapter of Nathan was closed, but our story was just beginning. A story of resilience, strength, and the unbreakable bond of a mother and her children. $2,500 for electricity? This is insane, Brian. We've been cutting back on everything to save money. Something's definitely wrong, I said, waving the bill in front of Brian's face, my voice trembling with frustration. He sighed, looking up from his phone just long enough to roll his eyes. "You probably left the oven on. I told you not to bake every day." I clenched my fists. "No, I make sure everything's turned off. There's something bigger going on here." I glanced out the kitchen window toward the old tool shed. It had been years since anyone had used it for anything but storage. Brian stood up, lazily stretching his arms. "You're overreacting, Liv. It's just a bill." "Just a bill?" I snapped. "We're wasting money we don't have, Brian. We need to figure this out." He shrugged and walked toward the living room, where the TV was blasting some reality show I never liked. "I'll look into it tomorrow." Anger boiled inside me as I glared at him. "Tomorrow? This can't wait. We need to check now." Brian flopped onto the couch, flipping channels without a care. Fine. I'll look at the breaker box later tonight, okay?" Later. It was always later with him. I stormed out the back door and towards the tool shed, flashlight in hand. The chilly Ohio evening did nothing to cool my temper. Once at the shed, I jiggled the rusty lock open and scanned the interior. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, untouched tools littered the workbench, and the faint hum of electricity caught my ear. I followed the sound, shining the flashlight into dark corners, until I found a run of wires leading from the exterior wall. My heart pounded as I traced the wiring back outside. I needed answers, not more questions. By the time I got back inside, Brian was asleep on the couch, typical. I grabbed my coat and headed out to the breaker box next to the house. The wiring setup looked standard at first glance, but something was off. Closer inspection revealed a secondary line trailing from it, leading underground towards the tool shed. "Brian," I hollered, but he didn't stir. Typical again. Frustrated, I stomped back inside and grabbed him by the arm. Come with me, now. What's your problem, Liv? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I dragged him outside, pointing at the wiring. Explain this. He stared at it, silent. I don't know. Maybe it's been like that forever. No, Brian, this isn't normal. I want to know what's going on in that tool shed. We trudged back to the shed in silence, the moonlight our only guide. With the flashlight scanning every nook, I felt like a detective on a crime scene. When we reached the shed, I flicked the lights on, and Brian looked genuinely bewildered. Come on, Liv, let's go back inside. We'll call an electrician tomorrow. Brian, stop delaying. We need to figure this out. I insisted, reaching for the plug that connected the tool shed to the main house. As I yanked it out, a sudden uproar of voices spilled into the quiet night. It wasn't just the hum of electricity, it was the TV inside the tool shed. We both froze. Brian's jaw tightened, and I could see panic flickering in his eyes. You've been watching TV in here? While we can't even afford our bills? I was beyond furious. But before Brian could answer, the shed door burst open, and there stood Paula, Brian's mother, her eyes wide with surprise. She marched past us, muttering something about her favorite show. Mom, what are you doing here? Brian asked, bewilderedly. Paula glanced back in a hurry to return to her program. Just catching up on my soaps. What's it to you? As she disappeared back into the shed, Brian avoided my gaze, shuffling his feet in the dirt. Brian, this bill isn't from some oven I left on. It's from your mother hiding out in the shed and watching TV every night. This isn't just carelessness. It's deceit, I said, shaking with anger. For the first time, Brian looked genuinely cornered, and in that moment I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. I found Brian in the kitchen, sipping his coffee and staring out the window. His silence was almost worse than the arguments. Brian, we need to talk about this, I said, my voice firm. He looked at me, his eyes tired and distant. What more is there to say, Liv? Mom's been watching TV in the shed. Big deal. I slammed my hand on the counter. It's a huge deal! We're struggling with bills because of this. You knew and didn't say anything. He sighed heavily. I didn't think it was such a problem. She's lonely since Dad passed. I shook my head in disbelief. Lonely or not, this isn't right. We need to discuss how to handle this situation. At that moment, Paula waltzed into the kitchen, her usual brisk self. Good morning, you two. Lovely weather today, isn't it? She said, completely ignoring the tension. I took a deep breath. Paula, we need to talk about the tool shed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What's there to talk about? I looked at Brian, but he avoided my gaze. The electricity bill is through the roof because you're living in the shed, Paula. We can't afford this. She stiffened, her jaw set. Living in the shed? I'm simply enjoying some peace and quiet. Besides, I have nowhere else to go. Brian cleared his throat. Mom, we were thinking maybe you should move closer. There are a few places nearby we could look at. Paula's eyes widened. What? I can't just up and move. This is my home, too. No, Paula, it's our home. Brian and I took it over after my parents passed. You moving in without asking is affecting us, I said, trying to stay calm. Brian shifted uncomfortably. We need to find a solution, Mom, something that works for all of us. Paula crossed her arms, defiant. Do you expect me to just pack up and leave? Where do you want me to go? A long silence followed. Finally, I spoke. There's a small property down the road. It's close enough so we can help if needed, but gives everyone their space. Paula scoffed. And how am I supposed to afford that? I glanced at Brian, feeling the weight of the situation. We can help you sell your current place, use that money to buy something new nearby. Brian finally looked at his mother. It's the best solution, Mom. You'll have your own place, and Olivia and I can sort out our finances. The room fell silent again. Paula's face flushed with anger, but she didn't argue further. She turned abruptly and left the room, muttering under her breath. Brian and I stood there, the silence heavy between us. This isn't over, Brian. We need proper boundaries here, I said quietly. He nodded, looking deflated. I know, Liv. Let's take it one step at a time. I watched as he walked away, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. This was just the beginning of untangling the mess our lives had become. But for now, it was a step towards reclaiming some control. The days dragged on, and the tension in the house didn't get any better. Brian's work hours grew more erratic, and his late-night absences left me both suspicious and worried. One evening, I found myself pacing the living room, glancing at the clock. It was past midnight when I heard the sound of the bathroom door opening, a sound I'd grown used to but couldn't ignore. I walked up to the bathroom door, noticing the bathroom lights still on and toilet paper running low again. Something wasn't adding up. Curiosity getting the better of me, I stayed by the door, listening. There were strange mutterings inside, almost as if two voices were speaking. I knocked lightly. "Brian?" No answer came. I opened the door a crack, peeking in, but found nothing unusual. The room was empty. Confusion crept in, making me more determined to figure out what was happening under our roof. The following day, I spoke to Brian about his odd work hours. He was sliding on his jacket, ready to leave. "Brian, why are you coming home so late these days? You never used to work these hours." He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just lots of projects at work, Liv. You know how it is." "You don't even tell me when you're coming back. It's not just about work, is it?" I pressed. His face hardened. "You're being paranoid, Liv. I've got enough on my plate without you grilling me." Anger and hurt flashed through me. "Paranoid? Do you think I haven't noticed the extra toilet paper being used? Someone is here when you're not, Brian." He turned away sharply. "You're imagining things. Let's just drop it, okay?" Later that night, I waited again, catching the same mysterious use of the bathroom. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I stayed up, pretending to sleep. At 2 a.m. I heard it, the distant, muffled sounds of conversation. Slowly, I crept out of bed and followed the noise towards the tool shed. Outside, a small glow of light peeked through the shed window. I approached quietly, peering in. There was Brian, not working, but lounging with his mother, Paula, both engrossed in a late-night TV show. My heart sank as the pieces started to fit together. The next morning, I confronted Paula as she was making breakfast. "Paula, we need to talk about what's going on in the tool shed at night." She looked at me, feigning innocence. "What do you mean, dear?" "You and Brian. You spend late nights in there watching TV while he's supposed to be working. Our bills are soaring because of it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Paula's eyes flashed with defiance. "So what if we watch TV together? Brian needs a break from you constantly nagging him." Taken aback, I narrowed my eyes. "This isn't just about TV, Paula. It's about you two lying and sneaking around." She smirked, leaning closer. "Maybe if you weren't so uptight, Olivia, Brian wouldn't need an escape." I stood my ground, feeling the fire ignite within me. "This stops now. No more using the tool shed. No more secrets. We can't keep doing this." Paula's expression changed, turning cold. "We'll see about that," she said quietly, but it was enough to know this fight was far from over. The reality of Brian's betrayal and Paula's influence bore down on me. I wasn't paranoid. I was in the middle of a deceitful game, and now I was determined to take control. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the dreaded electricity bill in front of me. My hands shook as I dialed the number for the power company. After a few minutes of back and forth, I managed to schedule an inspection for the following day. When the inspector arrived, he was a middle-aged man with a kind face. "Ma'am, I'm here to check on the high electricity usage you've reported," he said, tipping his hat. "Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I have no idea what's causing this," I replied, showing him the way to the tool shed. The inspector took out his tools and began examining the outside wall. After a few minutes, he frowned. "There's definitely something odd here. This wiring looks like it's been tampered with." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He pointed to a section of the wall where wires ran towards the tool shed. "These wires aren't standard. It looks like something's drawing a lot of power from your main supply." I watched as he continued his inspection, shining a flashlight into the dimly lit interior of the shed. "There's definitely some unusual activity here," he confirmed. I felt a surge of anger and frustration. "Can you help me disconnect it?" "Of course, ma'am, I'll get this taken care of right away," he responded, rolling up his sleeves. Within an hour, the unauthorized wiring was removed, and the shed fell silent, finally disconnected from our power. I thanked the inspector, who reassured me that the situation would be rectified in our next bill cycle. That evening, Brian came home looking annoyed. "Why's the shed dark, Liv?" he asked, tossing his keys on the counter. I crossed my arms, staring him down. "Because I had the power disconnected. The inspector found suspicious wiring." His eyes flashed with anger. You did what? You had no right. No right? We're drowning in bills, Brian. That shed was draining our finances. I shot back. Before he could respond, Paula appeared in the doorway, her face a thundercloud. What's this about the shed losing power? My TV's not working. I took a deep breath, preparing for the storm. The inspector found unauthorized wiring. We can't afford this, Paula. It stops now. Paula's face turned red with fury. You think you can control everything, don't you, Olivia? This is my son's home, too. You can't just decide these things. It's not about control, Paula. It's about our family's well-being. If you won't respect that, I'll take steps to make sure it's enforced, I replied, my voice unwavering. Brian stepped in, raising his hands. Everyone just calm down, all right? We'll figure this out. But Paula wasn't having it. She turned to Brian, eyes blazing. Your wife is ruining everything, Brian. You need to put your foot down. Mom, I've already told you we need to reduce our expenses, Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're just as much a part of this household, she hissed at me, ignoring her son's half-hearted protest. I am, Paula, which is why this can't continue, I responded, my patience wearing thin. Paula scowled. This isn't over, Olivia, not by a long shot. As she stormed out of the room, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And now, deep down, I knew the next steps would be the hardest. The following days were cold and silent. Brian avoided me more than usual, and Paula hardly left her room. In the evening, I decided enough was enough. I marched into the living room where Brian was mindlessly flipping channels. Brian, we need to talk. Now, I said, standing in front of the TV. He sighed and turned off the TV. All right, what is it? We can't keep living like this under a cloud of deceit and stress. We need to address the tool shed situation once and for all. Come with me, I demanded, leading him outside. As we stepped into the chilly night, Brian followed reluctantly. I led him to the tool shed and opened the door. Look at this, Brian. Look at what you've turned our home into. Brian stood at the entrance, his face shadowed. I don't see the big deal, Liv. It's just a shed. Just a shed? This just a shed has cost us thousands of dollars and driven a wedge between us. I barked, barely containing my frustration. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps rushing toward us. Paula, her face twisted in anger, appeared in the doorway. What are you two doing here? Without waiting for Brian to answer, I turned to her. Paula, we've had enough of this secrecy. I know you're using the shed every night. You need to explain yourself. Paula's eyes blazed. You think you're so righteous, Olivia. You don't know the half of it. Brian stepped back, looking trapped between us. Mom, just tell her the truth. Paula sneered. Fine. I've been staying in the shed because Brian promised me I could. He knew how much I missed my own space after your father's death, Olivia. I turned to Brian, my voice ice cold. Is this true, Brian? You knew about this from the start? He hesitated before nodding. I didn't think it'd become such an issue. I felt a surge of betrayal. We've been drowning in bills while you two play house out here. This isn't just about space, Paula. It's about respect, decency, and honesty. Paula took a step closer, her voice low and menacing. Don't preach to me about honesty, Olivia. You've always tried to control everything, making Brian's life a living hell. I'm the one who keeps him sane. My anger flared. Sane? Lies and deceit are what you consider sanity? Without warning, Paula grabbed the unplugged power cord and shoved it toward me. You want honesty? How about you admit you've been driving a wedge between my son and me ever since we moved in? Brian finally spoke, his voice broken. Mom, that's enough. Olivia's right. We need to stop this. What's been happening isn't fair to anyone. Paula looked horrified, as if she couldn't believe her son was siding against her. How dare you, Brian? After everything I've sacrificed for you? Without even looking back, I turned and walked out of the shed. Their voices faded as my feet hit the gravel pathway back to the house. I stormed inside and collapsed on the couch, trembling with the weight of everything. Minutes later, Brian entered, his face pale. Liv, I'm sorry. I looked up at him, my eyes cold. Sorry isn't enough, Brian. This has gone on too long. I need you to make a choice. Either we fix this mess together, or I fix it alone. He swallowed hard, the decision heavy in the air. We'll fix it together, he finally said, but trust wouldn't be easily rebuilt. That night, while the house finally fell silent, I knew this was more than just a strained marriage. It was a battle for control, honesty, and survival, and I wasn't done fighting yet. The house was eerily quiet the next morning. Paula had retreated to her room, and Brian sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his coffee. I knew it was time to take matters into my own hands. I started searching the house, room by room, for any equipment or clues that hinted at further deceit. It wasn't long before I found a small, hidden camera tucked behind a picture frame in the living room. My heart raced. This wasn't just about the tool shed. This was about control and surveillance. I marched into the kitchen, holding the camera. "Brian, what is this?" He looked up, his eyes widening with shock. "Liv, I swear, I didn't know about that." I slammed the camera on the table. "More lies, Brian? How much of our life has been recorded?" Paula stormed in, her face flushed with anger. "I did that. I needed to keep an eye on things while you were busy being judgmental and controlling." I turned to her, fury in every word. "Surveillance in my own home? How dare you?" Paula squared her shoulders unfazed. "I did what I had to do to protect my son." I took a step closer, my voice low but sharp. "Protect him or control him? You've overstepped your bounds, Paula. This is unacceptable." Brian stood up, trying to mediate. "Mom, this has gone too far. Olivia's right. You can't spy on us." Paula looked at Brian, betrayal in her eyes. "After everything, you're turning against me?" Brian's voice wavered. "Mom, stop. This isn't helping anyone. We need to stop the lies and deception. It's tearing everything apart." Paula's eyes narrowed. "You think you're better off without me? Do you really believe this woman cares about you?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Brian is my husband, Paula. I care about him more than you know. But this isn't about care anymore. It's about trust, which you've destroyed." The room was thick with tension. Brian took a shaky breath. "Mom, you should go. We need some space to fix things." Paula's face turned crimson. "You're choosing her over me? After everything I've done for you?" Brian's voice steadied. "I'm choosing to save my marriage, Mom. You need to leave." Paula's eyes blazed with hatred as she looked at me. "This isn't over, Olivia. You will regret this." As she stormed out of the house, Brian collapsed into a chair, his hands trembling. "Liv, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to come to this." I sat across from him, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Brian, we need to rebuild our trust. I can't keep living like this, doubting everything." He nodded, looking defeated. "I know. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." That night, I combed through the house, removing every bit of surveillance equipment I could find. Each hidden camera and microphone felt like another betrayal peeled away. Though the storm had cleared some of the air, the damage was deep. Brian and I sat in the living room later, the silence now heavy with the weight of the truth. "Thank you for standing up to her, Brian," I said quietly. He looked at me, eyes filled with remorse. "I should have done it sooner, Liv. I'm sorry for everything." The days ahead would be hard, filled with the struggle to rebuild what had been broken. But for now, the house was ours again, without the shadow of deceit looming over us. We had a long way to go, but the first step had been taken. Together, we would face whatever came next. A week later, Paula stood on our porch, eyes red from crying. It was strange seeing her so vulnerable. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice shaky. I hesitated but nodded. "Fine, but this has to be a constructive conversation, Paula." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where countless arguments had erupted. Brian joined us, his face tense. Paula took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot, and I realized that I overstepped. I didn't mean to cause all this pain. I just didn't want to feel alone." Brian reached out, touching his mother's hand. "Mom, we understand that, but spying on us and sneaking around wasn't the way to handle it." Paula's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I'm sorry, Olivia. I shouldn't have tried to come between you two. Can you forgive me?" I took a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Paula, it's going to take time. Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. But if you really mean it, we can try." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I mean it. I want things to be better. I want to be part of your lives, in a healthy way." I stood up, feeling the need to take control of the situation. "All right, let's start fresh, but there are conditions. First, no more staying in the tool shed." Paula quickly nodded. "Agreed. And secondly," I continued, "if you need somewhere to stay until you sell your place and find something nearby, you can stay with us. But we need clear boundaries." Brian looked relieved. "That sounds fair, Mom. We need to set things right." Paula smiled faintly. grappling with the emotions that had built up over months. Thank you, both of you. Days turned into weeks, and the house felt more like a home. Paula was staying in the guest room temporarily, and our communication had improved, but the scars of betrayal were still healing. One evening, as we were having dinner, Paula spoke up. I found a small place not too far from here. It's perfect for me. I'll be moving in next week. Brian and I looked at each other, a weight lifting from our shoulders. That's great news, Mom, Brian said, his voice filled with genuine relief. Paula nodded, looking more at peace than I had ever seen her. I hope this helps us move forward. I want to be a positive part of your lives. Later that night, Brian and I sat on the porch, watching the stars. Liv, thank you for giving her another chance, he said quietly. I leaned against him. It's not just about her, Brian. It's about us, too. We need to be strong together. He hugged me tightly. We will be. From now on, things will be different. The process of healing wasn't easy. There were still moments of distrust and lingering resentments, but we were making progress. We talked more openly, shared our worries, and sought to understand each other's perspectives. As the weeks went by, Paula's new place became a sanctuary for her, and our home slowly regained its sense of safety and love. The drama that had overshadowed us so long began to fade, replaced by a newfound respect and understanding. Paula was still part of our lives, but with boundaries that respected everyone's space and needs. The house was filled with laughter and joy again, and we finally felt like a family on the mend, ready to face whatever came our way. In the end, we realized that forgiveness and trust weren't just handouts. They were earned through consistent actions and genuine intentions. And we were all committed to making things right, slowly but surely. Paula's moving day arrived quicker than expected. I watched from the porch as the movers packed the last of her belongings into the truck. It was a strange mix of relief and trepidation. Paula walked over, looking both hopeful and nervous. Thank you for everything, Olivia. I mean it. I nodded. It's a fresh start for all of us, Paula. Let's make the most of it. She hugged Brian tightly and then turned to me, offering a tentative embrace. I accepted it, feeling the tentative warmth. As the truck pulled away, I turned to Brian. We need to change the locks and secure the house properly. He sighed but nodded in agreement. You're right. We need to make sure this never happens again. That weekend, I called a locksmith and replaced all the locks, then moved Brian's belongings into a rental storage unit. He stood by, watching as I packed his things. Liv, do we really need to do this? He asked, pain in his eyes. I paused, looking at him. Brian, we need to separate for a while. We've both been through so much, we need time to heal. He swallowed hard, finally nodding. I understand. Whatever it takes to make things right. The next day, I handed him the keys to the storage unit. You can stay there until you find a place. We'll talk about the rest later. Brian moved his things without protest, leaving the house feeling both empty and free. The separation was hard, but necessary. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. I changed the house's interior, making it my own again. Fresh paint, new furniture arrangements, and the removal of all surveillance equipment helped reclaim my space. It felt like an act of defiance and liberation. A week later, I filed for divorce, demanding alimony. When I handed Brian the papers, he looked broken, yet resigned. I didn't want it to come to this, Liv, he whispered. Neither did I replied, my voice steady, but we need to move forward separately. The court proceedings went smoothly, and soon enough Brian was legally out of my life. It was bittersweet, but I knew it was for the best. Meanwhile, Paula began renovating the tool shed into a livable space. She worked tirelessly, and I saw her determination to make things right. One afternoon, she invited me over to see her progress. As we walked through the tool shed, which now looked more like a cozy studio, Paula spoke softly. This is my new beginning, Olivia. I want to thank you for giving me this chance. I looked around, impressed by her efforts. It's looking great, Paula. I'm glad you found your own space. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. And thank you for letting us start fresh, too. At home, the quiet evenings were a stark contrast to the chaos that once engulfed our lives. Paula and I gradually built a newfound bond, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. One day, as we sat on the porch enjoying the sunset, she turned to me. You know, Olivia, Watching our favorite shows together has become my favorite part of the day. I chuckled, surprised by how much had changed. Mine too. Who would have thought? We laughed, the tension of the past finally easing away. Despite all the turmoil, we had come out stronger. I found peace in the everyday routines, enjoying the small moments that felt truly mine. The journey from betrayal to liberation had been hard and painful, but in the end, it forged a new chapter filled with promise. Paula and I survived the storm and discovered that sometimes even the most unlikely alliances could lead to genuine harmony. Together, we had built something that neither of us could have foreseen, a challenging yet uniquely rewarding peace. And with that, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next.
The sound of furniture scraping across hardwood floors stopped me dead in my tracks. My house key hung suspended between my fingers as unfamiliar voices drifted through the front door. Someone was inside my home, my sanctuary, my inheritance, my last connection to my parents. I'm Angela, and until this moment, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. The door creaked open to reveal stacks of cardboard boxes cluttering my normally pristine entryway. The scent of someone else's cooking, heavy with garlic and oregano, had already invaded the space where my mother's signature lavender potpourri used to reign. "Oh, Angela, you're home early," my husband Mark's cheerful voice carried from the kitchen, as if this was just another Tuesday evening. "Come help us get Mom and Dad settled in." My stomach dropped. Mom and Dad, his parents, Linda and Frank, settled in. The words came out barely above a whisper. Linda emerged from my kitchen, my mother's kitchen, wearing an apron I'd never seen before, already looking far too comfortable. "Mark didn't tell you. Our lease wasn't renewed, and we needed somewhere to stay while we figure things out." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "No," I managed. "He didn't mention anything." Frank appeared behind her, carrying what looked like their wedding photo. "Just temporary, of course," he said, though he was already eyeing the perfect spot above my fireplace, the same spot where my parents' wedding photo had hung for 30 years. I turned to Mark, who was suddenly very interested in unpacking a box labeled kitchen. "Can we talk?" "Privately." He followed me to the back porch, where I used to spend summers watching Mom tend her roses. The bushes were wild now, untamed since her passing 2 years ago. "They lost their apartment," Mark said, before I could speak. "The building's being converted to condos. They had nowhere else to go." "And you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" "They're my parents, Angela. What was I supposed to do? Consult your wife? Give me some warning? Anything besides ambushing me with new house guests?" "It's not an ambush. They need help." Linda's voice carried through the window. "Mark, honey, where should I put my good china? These cabinets are so cluttered." My hands clenched into fists. "That's my mother's china. We can make room," Mark said quickly. "It's just temporary, remember." But I saw it in his eyes. The same look he got whenever his parents needed something. That mixture of guilt and obligation that always ended with him choosing them over me. "How temporary?" I asked. "Just until they get back on their feet. A few months, maybe?" "A few months." The words echoed in my head as I watched Linda rearranging my kitchen through the window. Frank was already settled in my father's old armchair, remote in hand like he owned the place. "I teach online classes from home," I reminded him. "I need quiet, space, routine." "They'll respect that," Mark interrupted. But we both knew it was a lie. I felt it then, that first crack in the foundation of everything I'd built. This house was my anchor, my inheritance, the last piece of my parents I had left. And now it was being invaded, piece by piece, memory by memory. "I need some air," I said, already heading for the gate. "Angela, wait." But I was already walking, my phone in hand, texting my sister Sophie. "They're here. Mark let them move in," without asking. Her response was immediate. What the actual hell? What indeed? As I walked, Linda's calculating smile played on repeat in my mind. This wasn't just about needing a place to stay. I knew that look. She had plans. and somehow I'd become an obstacle in my own home. The sun was setting behind the houses, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again with Sophie's message. "Want me to come over?" I typed back, "Not yet, I need to think." And think I did. About every subtle dig, every backhanded compliment, every time Linda and Frank had tried to undermine my place in Mark's life. Now they were in my house, touching my things, erasing my parents' memory piece by piece. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a declaration of war. 3 days into the invasion, and my office door swung open without a knock. Linda stood there, vacuum cleaner humming in her hands, while I sat frozen mid-sentence during my online design workshop. "Sorry, dear," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Just tidying up a bit, don't mind me." 20 students watched through their webcams as I muted my microphone. "I'm teaching right now." "Oh, this won't take but a minute." The vacuum roared to life, drowning out any possibility of continuing my class. I typed a quick message to my students. "Technical difficulties, taking a 5-minute break." Then I ended the recording and stood up. "Linda, I explained yesterday that I teach from 9 to 11. These are paid sessions." She switched off the vacuum. Her lips pursed. "Well, how was I supposed to remember that? Besides, this house needs a proper cleaning schedule. When was the last time anyone vacuumed under your desk?" My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Pick your battles wisely, Angela." But Mom never had to deal with Linda. "I'll clean my office myself, after class." "Nonsense. You're so busy with your little computer job. Let me help." She reached for my desk, shifting papers I'd carefully arranged for today's presentation. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom. "Lunch today? Got that marketing proposal you asked about?" "Actually," I said to Linda, "I have a business lunch. I'll be leaving right after class." Her eyebrows shot up. "Business lunch?" "But I'm making my special meatloaf, Mark's favorite." She emphasized his name like a weapon. "Another time." I sat back down, making it clear the conversation was over. She lingered in the doorway, vacuum silent but still present, like a threat. "I suppose some people prioritize work over family," she said finally, shuffling away. I waited until her footsteps faded before reopening my class session. My hands shook as I tried to continue teaching, but the damage was done. The rest of the class felt forced, my usual enthusiasm replaced by a tight knot in my stomach. Later, at the small cafe downtown, Tom listened as I recounted the morning's events. "She's marking her territory," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "like a dog peeing on a fire hydrant." Thanks for that mental image. I flipped through the proposal he'd drafted for my freelance business. "You really think I could make it work, going completely independent? Your current teaching platform takes 40% of your earnings. Go solo, build your own brand, and—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring past me. "Incoming." I turned to see Mark and Frank entering the cafe. My husband's face darkened when he spotted me. "Angela, Mom said you were in a business meeting." "I am." I gestured to Tom and the paperwork between us. "Tom's helping me explore some options for expanding my teaching business." Frank's quiet voice carried unexpected weight. "Sounds expensive. In this economy, stability is key." "Actually," Tom interjected, "Angela's current success rate suggests—" "I'm sure you mean well," Frank cut in, "but family should handle family matters." The way he said family made it clear I barely qualified. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "We should let them get back to their meeting, Dad. We're just grabbing lunch." "Of course." Frank's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I'm sure your mother would have loved to see you for lunch, Angela. She went to all that trouble with the meatloaf." They moved to a table across the restaurant, but the damage was done. I could feel Mark's periodic glances, like pinpricks on my skin. "Well," Tom said quietly. That was subtle as a sledgehammer. I stared at the proposal in front of me. "They've been there 3 days, Tom. 3 days, and I'm already losing my mind." "Then maybe it's time to start playing their game." He tapped the folder. "Financial independence is a powerful thing." My phone lit up with a text from Sophie. Coming over tonight. No excuses. We need to talk. I looked back at Mark, now deep in conversation with his father. 3 days ago, I had a home, a husband who I thought supported me, and a clear vision of my future. Now everything felt like quicksand, pulling me under while Linda and Frank watched from solid ground. Okay, I told Tom, turning back to the proposal. Show me how to make this work, because one thing was becoming crystal clear. In this war, I needed my own ammunition. The bills were spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. 2 weeks of Linda and Frank's residence had doubled our utilities, yet somehow I was the only one concerned about the mounting expenses. I heard their voices drift up from the kitchen, thinking they were alone in the house. I'd told them I had a morning workshop, but canceled it after losing 3 students last week due to Linda's cleaning interruptions. The property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed, Frank said. If we sold now, I froze, pen hovering over my budget calculations. Mark would never agree, Linda replied. He's too attached to what Angela wants. Mark will see reason. The boys always understood the importance of family security. Their voices dropped lower, and I crept to the stairs, my heart thundering in my chest. Retirement fund won't last forever, Frank was saying. This house is our best option. We just need to help them see it's for the best. Linda's tone carried that false sweetness I'd grown to hate. Angela's business isn't stable enough to maintain a property like this anyway. My phone buzzed, Sophie asking if we were still on for dinner. I typed back, "Come now, please." I waited until I heard them move to the back patio before descending the stairs. The kitchen counter held papers they'd left behind. Bank statements, property assessments, real estate listings. My hands shook as I snapped photos with my phone. The front door opened, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mark walked in, home early from work. "Hey," he said, frowning at my expression. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Linda bustled in from the patio. "Mark, perfect timing. Your father and I were just discussing some family matters." "Financial matters," I corrected, holding up their papers. "Care to explain why you're researching property values for my house?" The silence that followed felt like a noose tightening. "Now, Angela," Frank began, entering behind Linda. "This affects all of us." "All of us?" My voice cracked. "This is my inheritance, my parents' home, which requires significant maintenance," Linda cut in. "The roof needs work, the plumbing's outdated." "Stop," I turned to Mark. "Did you know about this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. They mentioned looking into options. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Sophie's arrival saved me from completely falling apart. "What's going on?" she asked, reading the room's tension. "Show her," I told Mark, shoving the papers at him. "Show her how your parents want to sell my home, out from under me." "That's not," Linda started, but Sophie cut her off. "Are you kidding me?" My sister's nursing scrubs still carried hospital antiseptic, but her rage was pure fire. 2 weeks. You've been here 2 weeks, and you're already plotting? "We're thinking of everyone's future," Frank insisted. "Everyone's future?" I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "You mean your future, your retirement, your security." "Angela," Mark reached for me, but I stepped back. Just don't. I gathered the papers, hands steadier than I expected. "I need some air." Sophie followed me onto the front porch, where I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. "I have proof now," I whispered, showing her the photos on my phone. "They're not just trying to take over my home. They want to take it away completely." "We should call Tom," Sophie said. "He'll know what legal options." The door opened behind us. Mark stepped out, looking lost. "Can we talk about this? Like you talked to me about your parents moving in?" I asked. "Or about them planning to sell my house?" "They're just exploring options," he repeated weakly. "Options." The word tasted bitter. "Here's an option. They can leave." "Angela, no." Something inside me hardened, like concrete setting. "I'm done being the understanding wife. This is my home, Mark, mine, and I will not let them take it from me." Sophie's hand found mine, squeezing tight. Inside, I could hear Linda's voice rising, probably spinning this into another example of my instability. But for the first time since they arrived, I felt steady, clear, the path ahead crystallizing with terrible certainty. "You should go back inside," I told Mark. "Your parents need you." He hesitated, then turned away. The door closed behind him, with a finality that echoed in my bones. "What are you going to do?" Sophie asked quietly. I stared at my childhood home, at the windows where my mother once hung curtains that Linda had replaced, at the garden my father had tended, now being reorganized by Frank. "Whatever it takes," I answered. "Whatever it takes to make them pay." My laptop screen flickered with another cancellation email. Fourth student this week. The reviews mentioned unprofessional environment and constant interruptions. 3 months of Linda and Frank's presence had systematically dismantled everything I'd built. A knock at my office door made me flinch. Not Linda this time. Mark stood there, holding papers. "The mortgage payment bounced," he said quietly. I stared at him. "That's impossible. Mom and Dad offered to help." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "They suggested refinancing." The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. The mysterious bills, the rising expenses, Linda's smug smile every time she mentioned family contributions. "They're bleeding us dry on purpose," I whispered. "Don't be paranoid." But his voice lacked conviction. "They're trying to help." A text from Tom lit up my phone. "Meeting canceled. Investor backed out after background check." My hands started shaking. Linda had mentioned knowing someone at the investment firm. Just another coincidence. "I need to see the bank statements," I said. "Mom's already handling it." "Our bank statements, Mark, now." He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "They're not letting me access the joint account anymore. Said it was for security after some suspicious activity." The room spun slightly. "What suspicious activity?" "Large transfers to an unknown account." He finally looked at me. "They think you're hiding money." A laugh bubbled up, bitter and sharp. "They think I'm—" "Do you hear yourself?" Footsteps in the hallway announced Linda's arrival. She carried a tray of tea, playing the concerned mother-in-law to perfection. "I just heard about your business troubles, dear." Her sympathy dripped like poison honey. "Such a shame. But perhaps it's a sign to consider more stable options, like selling my home, like giving them everything they wanted." "I need some air," I managed, grabbing my keys. "In this state?" Linda's voice carried down the hallway. "Mark, you can't let her drive when she's so unstable." But I was already out the door, calling Sophie. She answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call you. Someone's been asking questions at the hospital about your mental health history." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What?" "HR got a concerned call about my troubled sister, potentially affecting my job performance." She paused. "The caller mentioned your recent erratic behavior and financial irregularities." I pulled into Tom's office parking lot, my vision blurring. He was waiting outside. "They're destroying everything," I said as he approached. "My business, my reputation. Your credit score too," he added grimly. I did some digging. Someone's been making inquiries, raising red flags, the kind that make investors nervous. They want me desperate. The realization felt like ice in my veins. Desperate enough to sell. Tom's expression hardened. "There's more. I found something in the property records. Your parents' mortgage had a clause about maintaining family ownership. If you sell, the proceeds go to a trust," I finished. "For future generations." Mom made sure of it, which they'd know if they'd seen the full documents. He met my eyes. "Angela, they're not just trying to force you out. They're trying to make you look incompetent enough for Mark to take control of the estate." My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Come home. We need to talk about power of attorney." Something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. I thought of Linda's careful manipulations, Frank's quiet pressure, Mark's willing blindness, 3 months of subtle degradation, of carefully orchestrated destruction. "I need a lawyer," I said. Tom nodded. Already called one. But Angela, they're not going to stop. This kind of calculated attack. I know. I looked at my childhood home in the distance, where Linda and Frank were probably already planning their next move. That's why I'm going to beat them at their own game. How? I thought of every dismissive comment, every orchestrated failure, every piece of my life they'd systematically undermined. By letting them think they've won, I said, right before I take everything from them. My phone buzzed again. Sophie sending screenshots of the hospital inquiry. The caller's name made my blood run cold. Linda's sister, a psychiatric nurse with access to medical records. The game had changed. They weren't just trying to take my home anymore. They were trying to erase me completely. The neighborhood block party buzzed with conversation and laughter, but I could feel Linda's performance before I saw it. A cluster of my longtime neighbors gathered around her, their expressions shifting from concern to pity as they glanced my way. Of course we're worried, Linda's voice carried across the lawn. The erratic behavior, the financial troubles. Sometimes love means making hard decisions for family. My fingers tightened around my glass. Sophie appeared at my elbow, her face tight with anger. She's telling everyone you're having a mental breakdown, she whispered. That Mark might need to take over the estate for your own good. The glass nearly slipped from my hand as Frank approached our small group, playing his part perfectly. Angela, perhaps you should sit down. You're looking rather unstable. I'm fine. The words came out sharp enough to draw attention. See what I mean? Linda's stage whisper to our neighbor Jane carried clearly. We're just trying to protect her from herself. Mark stood between his parents and me, saying nothing. Always saying nothing. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I felt, I'd love to hear more about these concerns, Linda. Please, share them with everyone. The party chatter died down. Linda's smile flickered, but held. This isn't the place, dear. We're just trying to help. Like you helped access our bank accounts? The words fell like stones into the sudden quiet. Or how you helped contact my students' parents about my unstable behavior. Angela, Mark stepped forward, reaching for my arm. Don't do this here. I jerked away from him. Why not here? Isn't this exactly where Linda wants to have this conversation? In front of everyone. You're proving their point, he hissed. Just calm down. Calm down. I laughed, and the sound scared even me. While they destroy everything I've built, while they try to steal my home, nobody's stealing anything. Frank's authoritative voice boomed. We're protecting family assets. My family's assets, I corrected. My parents' home, my inheritance. Linda touched her chest, the perfect picture of maternal concern. You see? These paranoid accusations. Mark, honey, perhaps it's time to discuss that power of attorney. The glass shattered in my hand. I barely felt the sting of broken crystal or the warm trickle of blood. Angela. Sophie moved toward me, but Linda was faster. Oh, dear God, she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. She's hurting herself. Mark, do something. I'm calling an ambulance, Frank announced, phone already in hand. Don't you dare. My voice sounded strange in my ears, distant and cold. Don't you fucking dare. This is exactly what we were afraid of, Linda said to the horrified onlookers. The mood swings, the aggression. We've tried to handle this privately, but handle this. I stepped toward her, watching her theatrical flinch with detached fascination. Like you handled my business contacts, my bank accounts, my reputation. Angela, please, Mark begged. You're embarrassing yourself. Something snapped inside me. I'm embarrassing myself. While your mother orchestrates my public breakdown. While your father tries to seize control of my home. They're trying to help. Help? I turned to the gathered crowd. Ask them about the trust clause in my parents' will. Ask them why they're so desperate to force a sale they can't profit from. Ask them, that's enough. Frank's command cracked like a whip. Mark, get her inside before she hurts herself again. Mark reached for me, but Sophie stepped between us. Touch her, and I call the police. The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. I looked at Mark, really looked at him. and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. Choose, I said quietly. Right here, right now. Choose. He looked at his parents, then back at me. You need help, Angela. Professional help. The last thread of hope snapped clean. Okay then. I pulled my wedding ring off, letting it fall into the grass. I choose too. I walked away from the party, from the whispers and stares, from the ruins of my marriage. Behind me, I heard Linda's performance reach its crescendo. The concerned mother-in-law watching her unstable daughter-in-law's public meltdown. But as I reached my car, I smiled, because Linda had finally overplayed her hand, and now I knew exactly how to destroy her. The restraining order arrived 3 days after the block party. I stared at the legal document, my hands trembling as I read the allegations. Erratic behavior, threats of violence, emotional instability, all carefully documented by Linda, supported by witness statements from concerned neighbors. I wasn't allowed within 100 feet of my own home. They can't do this, Sophie said, pacing my temporary room in Tom's guest house. It's your house. They already did. I watched through the window as rain pelted the glass. Linda's sister provided medical opinions about my deteriorating mental state. Frank's golf buddy judge signed the order. My phone buzzed. Another email from my remaining students' parents, withdrawing from my program. Linda's whisper campaign had worked perfectly. The lawyer says we can fight it, Tom said from the doorway. But it'll take time, money I no longer had access to, thanks to the emergency financial controls Mark had been granted. For my own protection, of course. Angela? Sophie's voice sounded distant. What are you thinking? I touched the window, tracing raindrops with my finger. I'm thinking about Mom, how hard she fought to keep the house and the family, how I promised her. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Tom checked his security camera and swore softly. It's Mark. My chest tightened. I can't. You don't have to. Sophie moved toward the door, but I caught her arm. No, let him in. I need to hear what he has to say. Mark looked smaller somehow, standing in Tom's living room. The confident husband I'd known, replaced by this uncertain stranger. They're worried about you, he started. Worried enough to steal my home, my business, my life. He flinched. Nobody's stealing anything. But after your behavior at the party, my behavior? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound entirely sane. Maybe Linda was right about me after all. Tell me, Mark, how should I have behaved while your mother systematically destroyed everything I care about? She's trying to help. Help? I stepped closer, watching him back away. By having her sister fabricate mental health concerns, by turning my neighbors against me, by freezing my accounts. You're not thinking clearly. I've never thought more clearly in my life. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd gathered, your parents' financial records, the calls they made to my students' parents, the conversations with real estate agents, every step of their plan to force me out. His face paled. Where did you get those? Does it matter? What matters is what I'm going to do with them. Angela, please. He reached for me, but I stepped back. They're my parents. They're not perfect, but they're family, I finished. And I'm not really, never was. That's not fair. Fair? My voice cracked. Was it fair when your mother convinced everyone I was having a mental breakdown? When your father used his connections to freeze my accounts? When you stood there and let them destroy me? Silence stretched between us like a chasm. What do you want? He finally asked. I want my home back. I want my life back. I want... My voice caught. I want the husband who promised to stand by me, not the coward who helped his parents tear me apart. They're filing for divorce, he said quietly. Dad's already drawn up the papers, given your current state. My current state, I nodded slowly. The one they carefully orchestrated. Tell me, Mark, did you know about their plan from the beginning? Or did they convince you along the way that destroying me was for my own good? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Get out, Angela. Get out before I give them real proof of my instability. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the rain. Sophie and Tom kept their distance, understanding I needed this moment. My phone lit up with a text from Linda. "We're only trying to help you heal. When you're ready to accept that help." I deleted it without finishing. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. If they wanted to paint me as unstable, fine. If they wanted to take everything from me, let them try. But they'd forgotten something crucial about cornered animals. They fight back. "Tom," I called out. "Remember that dirt you found on Frank's business dealings? Time to use it." The rain kept falling, but I barely noticed anymore. I was too busy planning their destruction. The anonymous email to Frank's business partners took 3 weeks to achieve its intended effect. I watched from across the street as police cars surrounded my home, their lights painting the evening in red and blue. Linda stood on the porch, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Frank sat in the back of a police car, his face ashen. Mark paced between them, running his hands through his hair. "You sure about this?" Sophie asked beside me. I touched the manila envelope in my hands. "They wanted to paint me as unstable. Fine, let's see how they handle their own carefully constructed world falling apart." The detective I'd contacted earlier spotted me and nodded. Time to move. Walking up my own driveway felt like crossing a battlefield. Linda saw me first, her eyes widening with recognition, then narrowing with fury. "You," she hissed. "You did this." "Did what, Linda? Expose Frank's creative accounting or his deals with those shell companies?" Mark stepped between us. "Angela, don't what? Tell the truth?" I held up the envelope. "Like the truth about how you and your parents orchestrated my breakdown, documented everything so carefully." Linda's face paled. "Those records are private." "Like my medical records? The ones your sister accessed illegally?" I turned to the detective. "I believe that's relevant to your investigation, Detective Chen." "You're destroying this family," Mark said. "No." My voice stayed steady, though my hand shook. "Your parents destroyed it. You helped them. We were trying to protect you. Stop lying." The words exploded from me. "You wanted my house, my inheritance. You couldn't stand that I had something you couldn't control." Linda's composure cracked. "We deserved security. After everything we've done for this family. This was never your family's home." I cut in. "It was mine, my parents' legacy." "Your parents?" Linda laughed, high and brittle. "Your father was a fool who—" The slap echoed across the lawn. Linda's hand flew to her cheek, shock replacing anger. "Angela." Mark moved toward me, but Sophie stepped between us. "Touch her," she warned, "and I'll add assault to the charges." Detective Chen approached, his notepad ready. "Mrs. Harrison, about those medical records." Linda's facade crumbled completely. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "We were going to lose everything. Our savings, our status. Frank promised he could fix it if we just had some capital. The house was never yours to take." I opened the envelope, spreading documents across the hood of the police car. "Every step of your plan, every call, every manipulation, every lie, documented as carefully as you documented my instability." Frank's voice carried from the police car. "Linda, don't say another word." But she was beyond hearing him. "We gave you everything. A husband, a family, support. You gave me nothing," I corrected quietly. You always took. And now," I gestured to the police cars, the gathering neighbors, her crumbling world. "Now you lose everything. Please." Mark tried one last time. "We can fix this." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. "No, Mark, we can't. But you know what? I don't want to anymore." Detective Chen finished his notes. "We'll need statements from everyone." I handed him the envelope. "Everything you need is here. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence showing how they orchestrated my mental breakdown to seize control of my inheritance." Linda lunged for the envelope, but an officer caught her arm. As they led her toward another police car, she turned back to me, her face twisted with something between hatred and fear. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You'll end up alone, just like you?" I finished. No, Linda, I won't. Because unlike you, I know the difference between having things and having people who truly care. I watched them drive away, Frank in one car, Linda in another, Mark standing lost in the driveway of a home that was never his. Sophie squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked up at my house, my parents' house, standing quiet and strong against the evening sky. No, I admitted, but I will be. The police lights faded into the distance, taking with them the family that had tried to destroy me. I climbed my porch steps alone, finally ready to reclaim my home. And this time, no one would take it from me. The divorce papers lay signed on my lawyer's desk, but it was the other document that held my attention. Frank's handwritten confession, detailing every manipulation, every scheme, every calculated move to destroy me. The DA's offering a deal, my lawyer said. In exchange for Frank's testimony about the financial fraud, they'll recommend minimal sentences. Through the office window, I watched Linda pace the hallway, her designer clothes replaced by something simpler, her makeup unable to hide her exhaustion. Angela, Sophie touched my arm. You don't have to decide right now. But I did. Because Linda had asked to speak with me one last time, and I needed to know what victory really meant. I found her by the window, staring at nothing. She spoke without turning. I used to watch my mother lose everything, she said quietly. Her home, her dignity, her children's respect. I swore I'd never be her. So you became something worse, she flinched. We thought we were protecting our future, Mark's future, by destroying mine, by controlling what we could. Finally, she turned. Do you know what it's like, feeling irrelevant, watching your whole world slip away? I thought of those first weeks after they moved in, how they'd systematically dismantled my life piece by piece. Yes, I answered, I do. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Mark's staying with his cousin, she said finally. He wanted to apologize, but he's still choosing his family. Aren't you? Her gesture encompassed the legal papers, the confession, the wreckage of her life. Choosing your family's legacy over mercy. The word hit like a slap. Mercy. After what you did, we were wrong, she whispered. And for the first time, I heard real regret. So wrong. But destroying us won't bring back what you lost. No. I pulled out my phone, showing her the email I'd drafted to the DA. But this might bring something else. She read it slowly, her hands shaking. You'd advocate for leniency. Why? Because my mother taught me the difference between justice and vengeance. I took back the phone. And because I refuse to let your actions define who I become. The door opened. Frank stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The house, he said roughly. We never told you why we really wanted it. Frank, don't, Linda started, but he continued. It reminded me of my childhood home, the one I lost when my father's business failed. I thought having it would fix everything broken inside me. He met my eyes. I was wrong. I thought of my own broken pieces, of how close I'd come to letting revenge reshape me into something unrecognizable. The DA's office will have my recommendation within the hour, I said. What happens after that is up to you. Linda stepped toward me, hand outstretched, but dropped it when I didn't move. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. I gathered my papers. Just remember this moment the next time you try to take something that isn't yours. Outside, Sophie waited with Tom. You okay? I looked back at the building, where my almost in-laws faced the consequences of their choices, where my almost husband would soon learn of my decision. I kept waiting to feel satisfied, I admitted, to enjoy their downfall. But all I feel is free, Tom finished. And he was right. The weight of revenge had lifted, replaced by something lighter. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps understanding. That evening I sat in my mother's garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she would have loved. The house stood quiet behind me, no longer haunted by Linda's presence or Frank's schemes. My phone buzzed with a message from Mark. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Sophie brought out tea in Mom's old cups, the ones Linda had tried to replace. So what now? She asked. I touched the familiar brick of my home, feeling its strength, its history, its future. Now, I said, I rebuild. But this time, I choose who gets to be part of the foundation. The garden needed work. The roses had withered under Linda's care. But as I watched the last light fade, I knew they'd bloom again. Different, perhaps. Changed by the shadow of what had happened here, but stronger for having survived the storm.